Let's go ahead and get our seats. You got to make a comment real quick. Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Paco with Landmark Solutions, and I have to correct myself. Okay, so about that one groundwater well after a dig when there's no groundwater contamination. So the rule requiring that does not have any basis for exemption from that. It was in the closure rule. 680 parent 1 for clean closure, where it says there's no free product, there's no soil contamination, and then C, contamination in groundwater is not present, as demonstrated by analysis of groundwater samples, blah, 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 parentheses, unless the department has concurred that groundwater sampling is unnecessary based on the site-specific conditions, et cetera, et cetera. So it was there where there was a basis for asking the DEP to review the site-specific conditions, and then if they concur, then you don't have to sample it. So just wanted to correct that.
Fair enough. Thank you, Paco. Do I have to list you as a speaker now? All right, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up with our last session. Fortunately, we have the folks from DOT that are going to come in and perfect, thank you. That's the way to end this session. In fact, let's do that at the very end. Have a great round of applause. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kathleen Toolan, who's going to run this session and set us up for their presentation on what they are working on. So Kathleen, all yours.
Thanks so much, Gene. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us for this final session of a very robust and interesting information-filled conference. Thanks to Gene and his team. Let me kind of put that away from me. Hopefully y'all will be able to hear me. If there's a problem, let me know. Again, Kathleen Toolan, I'm with DOT. I'm our environmental counsel. With me this morning are Asia Stoppe, who's from our District 2 office, Maria Salgado from our District 4 office, and John Cibotti from our Treasure Ops office. We're going to talk a little bit about practices for addressing contamination in our right-of-way, kind of go through some legal considerations, as well as talk about the MOUs that we have in partnership with DEP, both using the map note process as well as the right-of-way MOU. We're also going to have discussion on contamination for both projects and spills, as well as finally car contracting opportunities. For those of you who aren't familiar with DOT, obviously we're a statewide organization. We have 7 district offices, as well as our central office, which is the headquarters in Tallahassee, and the Turnpike offices on Ocoee. Each office has a district contamination impact coordinator. Maria and Asia are both fulfill those roles for districts 2 and 4 respectively. But we wanted to provide you with some contact information, numbers and phone numbers. It also includes my information. I'm happy to assist, and Bishoy Hannah's in our central office of environmental management. We all want to be contacts to help you as you encounter contamination on DOT properties. If you haven't, your source property has off-site migration into the DOT right away, we are a good contact in addition to the folks you work with at DEP. So moving to my specific quick talk, some legal considerations regarding contamination. Liable or not liable? That is the question. The big legal picture for liability: did we cause it? Did someone else cause it? Did we buy it? The answers to these questions affects how DOT addresses contamination in the right-of-way. So here's a real pretty picture of Alligator Alley, and talking about department right-of-way. When we acquire property for a transportation facility or a transportation corridor, whether it's through using our condemnation authority under eminent domain, purchase, or donation, we are statutorily exempt from liability for pre-existing groundwater or soil contamination, and our ownership interest does not create liability. So we are free under chapters from 376 and 403 contamination liability. That's been provided to us for quite a while, and that's under chapter 33727, which is the acquisition and eminent domain rules of the department. Interestingly, in 1996, a new section to the Transportation Code was enacted, 334, again, .27, and this provision extends not just to the Department of Transportation, but to governmental transportation entities. When acquiring a property for a transportation facility or corridor, there's that same exemption from liability under 376 and 403 for pre-existing contamination. Initially, it was expanded to include counties and municipalities, but subsequent to its enactment in 1997, airports were included, and then most recently in 2022, ports. The ports as identified in section 311.09, which are the 16 major ports in Florida, also have this exemption. So freedom from liability for pre-existing soil and groundwater contamination is not the only things included in those statutory provisions. There is also an opportunity for entering into agreements with DEP for performance, funding, and reimbursement of investigative and remedial acts. Theoretically, this is a fantastic idea. In practice, we're not seeing it a lot. Generally, funding is an issue, but it seems like there might be some more opportunities based on what we were hearing earlier today. So speaking of agreements, here we go. DEP has entered into 2 large agreements with DOT. One of them is the Petroleum Contamination MOU that I think most of you are probably familiar with, that was entered in 2014. And Asia is going to speak about that in depth during the next presentation session. And that's for addressing contaminants that have migrated into the DOT right-of-way. We also have a right-of-way MOU. There was initially one in 2012, but it was updated in 2018. And again, this is an opportunity to address the placement of environmental infrastructure in our right-of-way. Let's see. The right-of-way MOU, the cornerstone of DOT's mission, of course, is to protect our transportation facilities. The first thing out of the budget every year is maintenance, making sure we're maintaining our facilities. One of the ways we address activities in our right-of-way is through the issuance of a general use permit, and those are for temporary activities in the right-of-way. The general use permit is under Chapter 1420 of the Florida Administrative Code, and it can authorize uses such as monitoring wells, injection wells, treatment piping. As part of the ability to receive that permit, you need to make sure that there's a guarantee of the obligation and a notarized letter from the permit applicant. One of the issues, when I talked about solutions, one of the problems with environmental contractors working for DEP would want to go out and have to get a notarized letter from somebody in authority with DEP on each and every project. So this was really a streamlining venture to come up with a way to address those sort of liability obligations and making sure that the roadway is being protected. And so that streamlining goal was achieved through the use of this MOU, where the DEP contractors can use their work order and this MOU in place of having to have that project-specific notarized authorization And it's for a purchase order, work order, task assignment, as well as change orders. Okay. Something kind of unique to DOT is that we are not subject to local regulations for activities on the state highway system. That's under Chapter 335 of the Florida statutes. And so if you have a local regulation 28-32.1 that says, hey, you can't do this, or this is how the local government wants to address something, DOT is not going to be subject to that provision so long as it's an activity on the state highway system. However, we do work with a lot of local governments as they bring enforcement or assessment on behalf of the DEP. So if there's a local government acting as DEP under an operating agreement, obviously we'll work with you on addressing issues, but that is under the state authority where you're just acting on their behalf. So when is DOT responsible? Like everyone, if we cause or contribute or exacerbate contamination, we're on the hook. We do have a very active training program across all of our various program areas to try to be smart and know what to do. So we have a spill prevention, containment, and response training that's run out of our maintenance office. It's for all different staff, for asset maintenance contractors, for consultants, etc. And when is DOT not responsible? Well, we heard a little bit about the statutory exemptions, and we are not responsible or liable for pre-existing contamination in our right-of-way. Likewise, we are not responsible for third-party spills. As part of our effort to maintain the highway, the legislature has given us specific authority to bring action and hold folks civilly liable for any damages to the roadway. Certainly we know that there's $10,000 personal insurance coverage. There's also $10,000 property damage coverage under insurance policies that can go to addressing damage to the roadway. Often, of course, it's a lot more than that. One of the interesting kind of things I learned is that if you have a DUI, you have to have a minimum of $30,000 combined coverage. But with most of the spills or damages, we see that it's not generally limited to vehicles, but often the big trucking. They are required to have $300,000 in insurance for liability, or $750,000 in coverage if they cross state lines. We do a lot of the recovery of these type of actions, working not only with our internal claims office, also with the Attorney General's office, and most of that's handled with insurance companies. Under the Uniform Traffic Control Act, there's also additional provisions that extend beyond DOT, but to various governmental entities to recover in a civil action for damages to your highway if you're in control of the highway. So if it's a local roadway, there's also opportunity. And as I end, it's a quick true or false question. Here we go. True or false? When a governmental transportation entity acquires property for a transportation facility, it is free from all contamination liability. Who thinks true? Who thinks false? Who doesn't want to raise their hand? No. False. I mean, it sounds awesome, but false. Pre-existing contamination we're free from, contamination due solely to ownership. But of course, there's a limit to contamination liability and our freedom, and that is just chapters 376 and 403. Okay. I thank you for your time, and I'm going to pass it on to Asia now.
Hi, good morning. My name is Asia Stoppe. I work for District 2 FDOT. That's our headquarters is in Lake City, but we are North Florida. We do about 18 counties. I am a contamination impact coordinator in the production office. So that's project development, design, right-of-way. And then I'm just part of a team that works contamination issues for DOT. I have a counterpart, Emmy Delgado, in the construction office, and then we are supported by an in-house contamination remediation contractor. So it takes a group to take care of all these projects that we work on. And I'm really pleased to be here to talk to you about this MOU. It's a petroleum cleanup agreement between FDEP and FDOT. It was signed in 2014. And I think there's a lot of confusion about how it's applied and what sites qualify. Just if you will, a show of hands, how many are aware of this MOU? And has anybody successfully worked through the process on any of the, maybe a little, not quite, okay. Oh, some, great, okay, good deal. Well, you know, this MOU recognizes the complexity of third-party spills that migrate into the DOT operational right-of-way. That part's important. Yeah, so it was born out of discussions between the two sister agencies, and DOT's concerns come from our use of transportation funds for cleaning up contamination that's not not in our liability, and DEP's expressed concerns about the inability to close off-site contamination for sites that qualify for no further action with conditions, but because it is in DOT right-of-way and it's not possible to put a restrictive covenant over transportation use property. So born is this MOU, works to address some of those issues. And today's presentation for me is to add some of DOT's perspective on these two different, these two processes that I want to talk about that are covered in the MOU. I want to lean in and talk about what type of sites are in these programs and how to work through some of these processes and where we are looking for in the future for some future revisions for this MOU. So the two processes that this MOU talks about that I want to cover today really focus on petroleum restoration program sites. One process is for DOT to have the opportunity to prioritize funding toward PRP sites that are going to impact major transportation projects. And then the second process that's structured in this MOU is a alternative institutional control process for identifying and delineating contamination in the DOT right-of-way and creating a pathway to close restoration remediation processes on sites. So the first process is about FDOT prioritizing funding from DEP. There are three funding options that are available, and they recognize how complicated DOT construction projects are. We contract with a road contractor, and then we have a contamination remediation contractor that works and represents the department to address contamination issues within that project. But if we were going to try and add another agency and their contractor into our projects, it can get pretty complicated. I guess the point is we're really driven by the roadway contractor's schedule, and even though we are often requiring them to give us notice for when they're working in these areas, Emmy can attest that usually it's not a 2-week notice, it's, hey, we'll be there tomorrow. So these funding options kind of recognize that. The first one is that DEP advances their funding toward their sites, and we work to provide access and assist in that manner, but the work's all done in-house by DEP. And then the other two options are DEP provides DOT the funding to then use our own car contractors to address those situations, and usually that would probably be used during construction actions. So one is we create the scope of work and receive the funding and do the work, and then the second option, or the third option listed here, is that DOT has done the work, and now we're working through a a refund, a reimbursement option. And this is all due to availability of funding. So we're gonna, the priority is to spend contamination remediation funds from an agency who is responsible for that work, and then being able to use the transportation funds for transportation use. To use these types of opportunities for cleanup, project schedule, agency relationships, and then the MOU awareness of how it works is all really what makes this thing turn and these opportunities become realized. DOT, we look at the near future of what we're going to build, and then we also look out in the medium and long range plans for our projects. We have a program called the 5-year work program, and that's pretty reliable schedule and funding for what we're going to do in the next 5 years. And that includes not only construction, but also design, project concept development, right away. So all of those add to different options for addressing some contamination in DOT right away. Relationships are big. I know that Kathleen has a great standing relationship with FDEP legal staff. They meet monthly, and I think that I would say this is probably why this MOU still functions at all. She has been a great guide on helping getting some of these sites closed or addressed or worked through. And then awareness. Also back up one thing about relationships is that DEP has a liaison that's dedicated to DOT, so we have an opportunity to have somebody to contact on the other agency side to discuss and open opportunities and find out who we should be talking to see how these options can be realized. And I just want to say that, training and awareness about this MOU and staff turnover are all things that kind of make or break how we can access this opportunity. So with all that said, I just want to show you a couple examples of some successes and how this kind of works out. This is in our district. This is Alachua County. This is I-75. The aerial's 1974. The interstate had just been built. Since then, 50 years later, we continue to look at I-75, and we're in Alachua County. We're really looking at how to improve traffic flow and the interchanges. And in about 2015, we started looking at this interchange again. And I just want to show. I thought this was interesting. I love aerials. So I-75 just built, and there's at least 6 gas stations that have popped up since then. And I want to highlight the one in yellow. This is the one we're going to end up looking at later, but most of these gas stations are still out there. Prior to 75, this was just a country road. So this highlighted one, we call it the boot barn. That's what it was when DOT showed up to look at the interchange improvements. They had a small discharge reported in 1992 when the tanks came out. In about 2020, I reached out to DEP and our liaison, and we talked about this project. If you can see right there, we're looking at building a pond right over this boot barn property. So it was great. It wasn't a program that was funded. The site assessment work was just very slow. We came in, knocked down the building, and gave DEP access to the whole site. So they finished their site assessment. They created a remediation action plan. They did a small source removal. And after all the post-monitoring was complete, we got a clean Circo in 2025 in September. So it was great watching somebody else take care of something that we normally would have had to address ourselves. I highlight this one. This is from a few years before. This is a very old section of State Road 100 in Stark. We completely reconstructed the road and built a bridge over a rail crossing. And this is the beginning of our project. And the image on the left is showing DEP and DOT site data, sample data. So we knew during design and concept development that we're going to have some contact with petroleum impacts. And this is to kind of illustrate how this program works. The only site in this whole corridor that was in a petroleum remediation program is that Texaco. And they're working through their issues, but we knew we had other contamination along the way that just wasn't assigned to any kind of site. So I reached out to the site manager for Texaco, and we talked about the issue, and we talked that we're going to have an opportunity. This whole road is going to be ripped up and exposed. We have a real option to be able to remove and clean this right away. This is it. We're not going to be back for a while. I will say that I didn't realize how close Kathleen's relationship was with DEP. I didn't bring it to her at the time. This was when I was still probably trying to figure out the MOU. So it just sort of got stagnant. The former Texaco was also trying to decide if that was an off-site plume, so nobody was really taking responsibility for that. So we didn't actually get any funding to take care of this, and I kind of highlight what occurs during construction. So this is really our opportunity, and I wanted to highlight that this is what DOT does with contamination impacts, is that we use our transportation funds to support construction. So this is an image of them installing the storm drain across 100. We had just taken out all the soils that were in contact with that, but we didn't take confirmation soils showing, oh yeah, we got it all. So we'll still leave that plume out there. I think that if we had a little extra coordination, maybe we could have said to the state, this is a clean area out of our right-of-way. So that was the Stark overpass. So that was a review of the funding options. This second process out of the MOU I wanted to talk about is the more famous map note process. This is about closing remediation status on sites that have migrated some of their contamination into the DOT right-of-way. DOT has a very controlled right-of-way, and one of the things we can't do is put a restrictive covenant over our operational right-of-way. If it's in a transportation use, that restrictive covenant would interfere with those functions of that land use. So it's not legally an option to put a conventional, typical restrictive covenant over these areas. This is a nice example of what that migration into a right-of-way looks like. So these sites start with, for us and our involvement, they start with an agreement between the generator and DEP that it qualifies for no further actions with conditions. And when that agreement is made or that understanding is achieved and the generator agrees that they want to move forward with this type of map note process, it starts with a formal letter coming from DEP to the district secretary of the district that serves that area that the source site is within. It's kind of lengthy. It's not just a letter, it's a package of documents. A lot of it is very typical to other restricted covenant processes. There is, this is the package that comes to DOT, so we're looking at the site itself with the soil data and the groundwater data. There are legal descriptions of the site and the area within our right-of-way. I think what is also unique is that there is a map note that is surveyed onto our right-of-way maps, and then there's an not easy for me to say, indemnity agreement between the generator and DOT, saying that the liability and ownership of this contamination remains with that source site. If you are going to go through this map note process, we highly recommend that you CC the district secretary, the district contamination impact coordinator and central office environmental legal, that's Kathleen. It goes to the district secretary and they have no idea really what this is, and sometimes it causes panic and it goes around the office, and this is a direct, these are the folks that are going to actually be able to shepherd this review through the department. This is an example of what the map note looks like. It is surveyed onto and tied to FDOT right-of-way maps. I included a link. There's a public website for FDOT surveying and mapping, and there is a contact list for the different districts and their dedicated mapping offices, and they are there to help answer questions and provide benchmarks and different data on what that survey requires. In the MOU, it talks about what we're looking for in the map note itself. That was in 2014. Really what we're concerned about is identifying the type of contamination, the site facility that is the source site, an FDOT roadway ID, and then in these draft documents, this CERCO date is left blank until the whole process is complete. But in the final process, there'll be a conditional closure date listed on the map note. And then, I won't jump ahead. So this is just a graphic showing sort of the general process. That letter comes in to DOT, and we do an internal review. There's a number of different staff and offices that are involved, and including Kathleen in central office. The surveying and mapping group will look at the survey data. Right away, we'll also take a look at that property, and then the DCIC and then some other staff will also review it for understanding of what's being asked. For sites and situations where FDOT can support the map note process, then FDOT will acknowledge that with a letter back to DEP, and we add this note to our right-of-way maps. DEP will issue an interim closure letter to the generator, and then that discharger generator will file property and legal documents identifying this map notation in the deeds and the indemnification agreement between the two parties, being the generator and DOT, and that's at the local county clerk's office. So I wanted to step back a little bit and talk about what DOT is looking at when we're doing the internal review. We're going to review the site data and look at what contamination is there. We will review what work's been done on the site. We also check to make sure that it is actually DOT right-of-way. Sometimes ownership can jump between city or county and DOT, so we've had to deny a few that didn't actually occur in our roadway. And then really the best information that we have to give is we do a project review. So we're going to look at what work we're going to be doing in those areas in the next foreseeable future. And if there is something coming up, I think that gives us an opportunity to evaluate if we can actually provide the opportunity to remove that contamination and actually get a clean closure. So those are things that we're looking at. And then the final steps. So DEP will issue a final clean closure. DEP records the complete map note, and documents are filed in DEP's Oculus database and in our office. And this site becomes an institutional control registry site. So this is an image showing the MapDirect DEP MapIt data, and you can, I'm not sure if you can see it, but there's a little square, that's our map note. So these things are discoverable during phase 1 due diligence research. So this is, again, our district and different contacts of who can help work these projects. I wanted to say that very shortly after this MOU was signed, the question was asked to DOT, can we use this on a different program outside of the PRP? And the answer ultimately was yes. I know in my district, we've closed 2 sites, one both with arsenic, low-level arsenic groundwater contamination. They were waste cleanup sites. One was a former fertilizer site, and the other one was a former metal smelting facility. So the process and the map note, they are successful, and we want to be able to assist in using cleanup funds and transportation funds efficiently. I think I had something else to say, and I can't remember what it is. I will say this. This presentation, I'm really pleased to be able to giving it to this audience, and Kathleen and I, all the DCICs have been talking about ways that we can move this MOU forward. There's an initiative to have it revised so that we can memorialize how we're going to use it, how we are using it differently outside of the PRP program. And, you know, I think that DOT will also make the ask, can we try to request funds for sites in the waste cleanup program, not necessarily just PRP. So you have our contact information, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Hello. Let's see, I'm vertically challenged, so I gotta get closer. My name is Maria Salgado. I'm with District 4. I've been in the department for now almost 18 years, and in this role as a DCIC, and I don't work alone. As everybody knows, we all have in the district contamination assessment contractors. These contractors, we generally, and you'll hear it throughout the speech, we call them car contractors. So we can't live without them because the DOT has various few of the DCICs, and therefore we need the assistance. As part of the work that we do, we always want to let you know when we start working in contamination. So technically, from the beginning of a project, contaminations gets going. And the contamination program would say that starts at the beginning, meaning that we start with a PD&E study, which is a project development environmental study. This study is a long study, so it takes about 3 years to get going. And because it has many different moving parts, we are there to, the DCIC and the CAR team are there to review these reports, make sure that the screenings that are being done for contamination in the entire corridor get done. But primarily the main focus of these PD&Es is to evaluate the social, economical, and environmental impacts proposed on the transportation projects. So the idea is that we're trying to follow the requirements from the National Environmental Policy Act of 1969. So in these PD&E studies, we want to identify early on the contamination impacts, if any, or concerns, so that when the project gets going, that the improvements that are happening don't have a liability that follows throughout. So there's many things that occur during this time, but because the study is long-lasting, we continuously follow it along. So when these studies are completed, there is a reevaluation, and the word states what it is. It's we reevaluate the entire corridor or the study that got done to make sure that with time, the original environmental project that got studied, we document the changes and review that the approved study remains valid, and so that all the features that came with it are still adequate. And so at this point, we still do the contamination review to make sure if anything has changed throughout the time, because you know contamination pops out anytime, so it doesn't wait for a study to complete or the next segment to start. So at this point, there's 3 types of evaluation reports that we use or that we do. One is the right-of-way, one is the design change, and one is the construction add. So that would be the final one. Sometimes when projects have no changes and they're great and they follow throughout, then all they would have is a construction advertisement revaluation. But if there's many complicated projects, then it could have several phases or several design changes that can occur at that point. And next, after we've decided that the PD&E study has concluded and we're ready to start the project, now comes the design portion of a project. And during the design, again, the DCIC, along with the car contractor, is heavily involved reviewing and the documents that are being produced with the project managers. So the project managers at this time use phases of the plans, how they get created. That's why in DOT we don't use the word as a phase 1 environmental report or a phase 2, because that word is already taken into the design phases. And if we had them together, they'd be confused over if you're talking about the design phase or you're talking about contamination. So in DOT we use the word a level 1 verse, to say that it is a simplified version of the phase 1s that you guys are normally acquainted with. So in each phase, so that each department will have projects that can go about in in each phase that the project gets going, we start off with a 30, 60, 90, and 100. Those are the general ones. Sometimes, of course, they get sped up and we lose out the 30% phase, or some phases get summarized. But throughout the project, the contamination group, this goes throughout and makes sure that the contamination concerns are addressed, noted, evaluated, so that we can meet the milestones according to each phase. So we have to move along with the project. Now this, like I said, this design phase lasts another 3 years. Sometimes the PD&E, since it's 3-year, can overlap 1 year. And so we'll have the design and the PD&E phase overlap 1 year, so that's how we can speed up a project. But generally, they're 3 years each, if they're major projects, obviously. Some are simpler, smaller projects that don't take that long. But the idea is that in DOT, we all have to follow a production pattern. And as the PM moves along the project, we have to move along. And if you guys know, contamination doesn't have this kind of thing that, it's going to move quickly because your phase is coming up. No, I mean, we keep on looking at contamination, but sometimes the department doesn't have the ability to actually do all the cleanups during this time for the contractors or for the project managers. But we do at least screen them out to find those and track them throughout. So what does the DOT use to organize ourselves? So the department keeps a well-oiled machine. They do not accept you missing your milestones. And in order to keep us with all the milestones required, they have different applications that we use in order to keep those milestones. So these are the couple of, I just want to show you guys what are the couple of applications that the department uses to be able to keep us on track. So we have, there's checks and balances throughout, and all the documentation that gets produced by the contamination team, either a level 1 report, a level 2 reports, or any screening that we might do, any of the information that might come from other agencies, we want to be able to store it, upload it into these applications so that everybody can see what's going on or your activities as you move along throughout the project. So these are a couple of the applications that we have to upload. Our review of the plans come through the ERC, and if you guys work with DOT, you know that we get assigned projects and we have to review them by the phase that they come out, and those are the design phases that I mentioned before. So they'll pop out as your responsibility to review them, and we'll use the car contractor or ourselves to review each of the plans to make sure that as the project has progressed, the contamination concerns are still valid. We know where they're at. The design might change, so therefore we have to do additional assessments throughout. Now, this is where I was coming about what is a level 1. So for DOT, a level 1 is really just the idea of a screen talk desktop review. And I know a lot of people are like, your level 1s, are they the same thing as phase 1? They're simplified. They're not as big as the normal phase 1 reports. They're simplified because we're going throughout a corridor, so we have tons of sites throughout the corridor, but we do hone in on the ones that have the most impacts. But the typical ways that we do it is just like any way you guys do it, is the GIS mappers that we use from the agencies that are provided. We look those over. We look at the regulatory reports. We make sure that the aerials are seen as well, field reviews. And throughout the projects, we want to go and do our due diligence to find out if any of the impacts that these projects are going to have at an early stage are known. So then, one of the areas where we work a lot with is with right-of-way. As the project progresses, they are looking at the areas of right-of-way that we're going to be either acquiring or taking, and those get assessed as well. We first start off with the level 1 and check and see if there's any concern that might take us to do further assessments at that time. So we want to review those documents early on to assist the right-of-way group in letting them know what the concerns that are coming. We write a memo to them saying, okay, we reviewed your corridor. This is what each site that is going to be part of this project, the concerns that were found, if there was any. And we provide that document to them so that we work in a team so that they also know what the properties that are being acquired or looked at or easements, what they may have in the future. So right-of-way is kept in the loop as well. So when when we see a site that has concerns or that has gotten further in our review, we do the level 2 assessments. And at this point is when we do the soil and groundwater work. We test not only for the sites, but we also test our bridges, our structures, properties that we own if they're in that corridor or that are being managed or acquired by DOT. So the level 2 is a simple, you do either the bridge testing that's got the lead, asbestos, heavy metals that are being tested at that point. And we produce a sign and seal document at the end, which is the level 2 assessment report that gets uploaded into SWEP, that gets uploaded into PSE, into ERC. We make sure that everybody has access to it so that we are aware, and it ultimately gets packaged to construction. But I'll talk more about that as we progress. So now, another aspect where we do the level 2 assessments is in the ponds. So during the PD&E study, so the project development and environmental study, ponds get chosen. We decide, once the department decides what ponds they're looking at, then they're going to give us an idea of those ponds. We do a screening on them first, so we do the level 1 on them, because we don't go and attack the level 2, because ponds are like moving targets. One day it's one site here, then it's the other one, it's not. So whatever the project managers and the design team decide, we start screening them first, and if it's going to be, once the ponds are chosen, then we start doing the level 2s to determine what are the impacts of those properties to convert them into a pond. And in our area, it's a highly commercial area, industrial areas are prevalent. Some of them get very complicated, and others that are simple, then we're really glad to work with those. But if not, we do make sure that we let them know what are the impacts that are going to come by from that acquisition of that pond. And we evaluate them. You know, there's a pond siting report that gets produced where you get the opportunity to evaluate the condition of the contamination, and you'll be able to rank that opportunity. So now, let's talk about what gets packaged at the end of design. So we already did PD&E studies. We were part of that. We screened it. We did the level 1s. We're good. Level 2, design. We do the level 2s, level 1s to make sure we get all that documentation now accumulated. We start doing the packaging in to be able to let the contractor know. That's when the project gets awarded, what to expect in those areas, what to bid for, what are the areas of concern. Do we have plan notes? Do we have typical specs that are special provisions that are going to be used as supporting documents? All those documents that we did throughout the 3 years and 3 years, we package them in at the end as production documents get produced. So at that point, we upload them as well to the agencies, and we give them into SWEPT. So SWEPT is where we collect all the documents for our central office, also to look at the documents and make sure that we're not outside. So after that, then we go through the next phase, which is the construction phase. When we enter the construction phase, we start off with a kickoff meeting. So in these kickoff meetings is we start just to get to know the contractor that got awarded. We talk about what their what segments are going to be worked on, what's the timing of the segments, and we also explain to them the contamination concerns throughout the segments that we've identified during the design phase. And we explain the roles that the DCI is going to have and the car contractor is going to have. We give each other the contact information so that when they arrive in those segments or those sections that we've noted in the plans or the special provisions, we'll tell them where they need to call us in advance and how long in advance. So we'll have that little kickoff meeting and we start discussing what's going to come throughout. And this is important for us because this is the time where the project hasn't really started. It's just in the management phase. So we take it seriously to go with them, to give them the contact information. So in case they decide to go out running with it, they already know what to expect. So these are a couple, here I listed what the level 3 remediation cleanup activities can entail. So this is the typical types of activities that we can get involved with them. Not every project has them, but these are the type of activities that the contamination car contractor can assist the department or the contractor at this point if needed. So we work with the contractor hand-in to decipher the issues early on. So at the kickoff, we already told them where the areas of concerns are going to be. So at this point, it's just getting the project rolling, applying for permits, doing the soil management if they're going to be in an area that has soil impacts, making sure that if there's an emergency response activities, like a third party that has an incident in the right of way where the contractor is now going to be working, that they understand who to call, who's responsible for the areas, what's the protocol for that area. And you're going to get an idea later on in the next speech of what's the process that the department does. But during the third parties, we get involved to assist the construction contractor to be able to understand what's the process of who to contact during that emergency response activity. All right. So another type of project, all that we've been talking about, they have a PD&E, they have a design, and they go to construction. Those are conventional projects. Those are the typical projects that DOT does. But there's also a different type of project that could come about in DOT, would be a design build. So what's the difference between a design build and a conventional? Well, basically, it combines, the design build projects combine what is called the single contractor that gets awarded to do the construction and the design at the same time. So, and the other one, on the general one that we do, or the conventional, we hire a contractor at each phase. And the car contractor assists at each phase. So the design build can have a variation. It could hire the one company that may have they could have their own car, they could have their own design team, they could have their own construction team. So that is the design build firm that they can hire all that. The DOT still has overview of the projects. We still use our car contractor to ensure that our right-of-way is maintained and that the cleanups are being done accordingly and that the regulations are still being followed. So we are still heavily involved regardless. And we work as a team. They work fast. They go a lot faster, but at the same time, we make sure that we talk to them ahead of time, so explain when we need to be called and at what points that they should be calling us. Something that's different from District 4 and other districts, we do have a rail corridor on the western part of the portion of District 4. Well, there's two. The FEC line is the eastern, and the western is we call the SFRTA segment. That segment gets from Palm Beach down to Miami, gets taken care of by the district because it's the right-of-way that is owned by the department. So the department at this point has a responsibility to oversee the contamination, even though there is a car contractor that is already part of that agreement, but we still oversee because it's our property. We want to make sure that they're taking care of the property. So we do inspections on a monthly basis for them. We have we interject with them on how the cleanups are going. We review the reports that get produced, and we make sure that whatever capital improvements are being done, we can see what are the impacts, what could they come about. The structures that are there, the buildings that are there could have asbestos, so we do the 6-month inspections for that. So we're heavily involved in those activities as well. And now, I'm going to pass the next to John Cibotti. He's going to be talking about the spill response.
Right. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to be talking about spill response. I'm John Cibotti. I work for District 4's Occupational Safety and Health Unit under the District Safety Office. We're going to be talking about spills in different contexts. We will be talking about spills in right-of-way. That is a really indicative picture of what a spill in our right-of-way looks like. And thank you to Pietro, our consultant, who put these together for me, because I said, Asia has all these fancy aerial photos. I want a fancy photo. We're also going to be talking about contractor caused, mostly on construction sites. And then what my unit mostly handles is third-party caused. So at FDOT facilities, we have generators, we have ASTs, which are above-ground storage tanks. We are working in my district on a spill prevention, countermeasure, and control plan, which a lot of ASTs require, or large amounts of petroleum, if you're storing them, require. There's the Everglades publicly owned treatment works, which have their own kind of protocols, but they are there for the rest area and for the firehouse. We also have, I believe every district has a materials office. They don't have so much the risk of spills, but they do have large amounts of silica dust deep cleanings we do every year. They also have a small amount of radioactive material, so they fall a little bit more into industrial hygiene, but still things we have to contain. We'll move on to contractor caused, which is mainly in construction sites, and that top left picture is very indicative of what happens quite often. There are a lot of hydraulic fluids that get punctured from lines. A lot of construction sites also have temporary kind of tanks put in for their diesel and their fuel system needs. They also require SPCC plans for construction sites, which also they do occasionally have spills. There's not often, but there are occasionally crashes that occur on construction sites. We have to respond to that. Either Maria or myself will tag team those. And concrete washouts. My father was a brick mason and concrete layer, so he always used to wash out in the bushes next to the driveway. Apparently that's a no-no, so he wouldn't be happy about that picture there. Third-party caused. Now this is on FDOT's right-of-way meaning FDOT's roads. So our protocol is to first look for the responsible party to take action, to take ownership of the containment and also, if necessary, the remediation. Like you'll see that tanker in the bottom left, they would call their insurance company, they would come out. The towing company, the fire department usually initially set up containment. Hopefully in that scenario probably wouldn't be able to contain the entire right-of-way. If the responsible party cannot provide containment or remediation, my contractor, like Maria mentioned, my car contractor will step in. Contamination assessment and remediation contractor will step in, clear the road, and then conduct any soil remediation. There are other spills as well, I should mention. There could be chlorine, there could be, funny enough, something like orange juice. It sounds funny, but that actually over time deteriorates the asphalt, so my unit has to then inform like the maintenance office so that they can go and make sure that the asphalt isn't deteriorating. I'm not going to read all the wording on that, but there's something called a TIM meeting, Traffic Incident Management, and it's where basically all the interested parties and stakeholders for crashes and containment and remediation for right-of-way on FDOT get together, and they go over some trends, they go over some numbers, and they start talking about, they have a nice conversation about what's going on and what they're seeing out on the roads and what the shortcomings, deficiencies, or great things they're seeing. Could be the towing companies, that we have FHP, fire departments, obviously FDOT's involved. The goal of it's what Tim follows is called the open roads policy, and the goal is to have the roads open in 90 minutes. That's the goal that they try to meet for every crash. So yeah, it's a great thing that obviously my unit gets involved in. Speaking of what we get involved in, we also get involved in LEPCs, Local Emergency Planning Committees. FDOT, what my district has to do is submit what's called a Tier 2 report, because we have ASTs at all our op centers, operation centers. Other than that, we do participate in their emergency management aspect for declared emergencies, because we do have a component, a stake in the game, mostly for how we would help other parties like the fire department, like the Coast Guard, et cetera, to clear the roads and to make sure that they have access to get to the areas they need to. So we do need to be involved in their planning from every county, but it's a very important part of what we do. As for the Tier 2, my district just got downgraded to only reporting our ASTs because we have such a large amount of petroleum. Now, District 4 is the only district where OS&H has a car contract, but they are prevalent and present throughout the state. And to talk more about car contracts, I'm going to turn it back over to Maria or Kathleen, whoever wants to take it. Thank you.
I think what we've heard a lot about today is about relationships, internal, external, with agencies, with our consultants and our contractors, and even members of our own team. And one of the things certainly that you heard are there are car contracting opportunities in-house for each DOT district, as well as Turnpike. We have consultant support in Tallahassee. So there's opportunities there to be part of the DOT team through car contracting opportunities. Normally, the car contractors are in the planning and environmental management offices of each district. Other opportunities outside of just going direct with DOT, but to be part of a DOT project contractor. So ABC Construction is building the road. They're going to need to have a subcontractor on there to look for and deal with contamination issues. So there's opportunities to be a sub on a major road builder contractor. Other contract opportunities are with the incident response management, like John was just talking about. Asset maintenance, we have asset maintenance contractors that are responsible for, this is again throughout the state, that are responsible for certain lane miles. Some of their activities might be really simple, like mowing the grass along the roadside, but that might be another opportunity for a sub role, to be a sub to an asset maintenance contractor and to deal with their contamination issues. This contracting and the way that it is done is the competitive solicitation process covered under Chapter 287 of the Florida statutes. There's a couple of links in here. One of the things, of course, you have to be registered in my Florida marketplace in order to be a bidder. And we just kind of wanted to talk to you, though, and let you know that there are opportunities not only with the department, but joint venture opportunities with builders and users of our roadway, as well as to be subs on other existing contracts. Okay. That's kind of bringing us to the end of our presentation. I know that it's the last session and everybody's anxious, but we certainly are available and are happy to answer questions on any of the topics that we addressed today.
We see in your advertisements for PD&E projects that the level 1 scope is mostly assigned to the consultants, but sometimes it's kept in-house for the car contractors. I was wondering if you could describe the decision process for when it remains in-house, and is that consistent between the PD&E and design?
Is this on? Yeah, you guys can hear me? So I think it's at the discretion of the DCIC. Marie's telling me that it's always a consultant from the PD&E contract consultant. So in District 2, so that's District 4, we do a lot of things very similar and we have our own flavors. So in District 2, a decision to keep something in-house may be that the PD&E is very simple and it's something that we can document without a lot of effort, and we feel comfortable with that. Other opportunities that we may decide to keep it in-house is if the project corridor is very complicated with a long history, and we feel that our car contractor or who we're going to contract with it in-house has a better understanding of the process and the site history. DOT was always coming back. I'm thinking about Jacksonville and the big interchange at I-95 and I-10. We repeatedly come back to this interchange. We still haven't worked it out yet. And there's a lot of internal documentation about prior research and remediation that we've done that may or may not be public information. And for me, in my experience, the PD&E or design consultant sub that's doing the level 1, I may give them all that documentation, and I'll get the draft of the level 1, phase 1, and then I say, please include all, review and include all that documentation. So usually it's just, it's district preference, but if we feel like there is staff internally that can address it most efficiently and thoroughly, then that's when we would choose to do that. But we do like to give opportunities for other consultants to, work with DOT, and it's just different. We're focused on the corridor. It's different than what remediation for a DEP or other cleanup site is. We are looking to support construction, not necessarily figure out how to clean it all up. And there may be contamination in the right-of-way and within that corridor, but if we're not doing any subsurface work, we just keep on moving down to the next hot spot. So we're looking for where we're going to encounter it. So that's a little different than other remediation processes.
Is there any difference between, that sounds like the level 1 for the PD&Es mostly. Any
Yeah.
difference in the design phase? And because there is some differences between districts, is there any effort to standardize that so that, the consultants can maybe
Know where to put their effort.
prioritize, or, maybe District 1 is doing it that way, District 4 isn't?
I think that maybe you'd have to call the DCIC and know if there's a way. I know that other districts rely very heavily on consultants, and then there are other districts that try to have dedicated environmental specialists that take responsibility for more than maybe other districts, and that's been DOT's, District 2's approach, is that they want the understanding and flexibility to be in-house as well as consultant support. Not every DOT project goes through PD&E, but they all go through design. So sometimes we do end up with design level 1s, but really during design, we are often we use the level 1 to decide where we're going to sample and investigate for potential impacts. Did I answer your question?
Let me just add to what Asia's talking about. For the PD&Es in District 4, I don't remember one that we've taken back, but I can see we have been in the same understanding. If the corridor has a lot of information that we have internally that is more complicated or difficult for us to give because these are not public records, or not in that sense, but just because we would have a lot of the history, then we'd keep it. But generally in District 4, we haven't kept any of the PD&E studies, so the contamination screening evaluation report hasn't been kept. But during the design phase, it's different because the scope of service is designed so that at that point, the DCICs take over the reviews of the level 1s and 2s that occur at that point. So even when we do the scope of service, at that point we cross out all the activities that get done by the designer. So at that point is when you're probably referencing where we take over the level 1s, level 2s, as we get involvement of the car contractor now taking charge of the activities. So we'll have that look through those reports at the phases during the design, so 30, 60, 90, and production. We have the control over that only because we hire the car contractor for that specific reason, so we can follow the movement of the project, and at that point we keep the idea going because we're going to be assisting during construction. So it's just easier for us to, since we started at the design level, we get to continue it in construction, so we know how the corridors, where the impacts are at, what the concerns may be, the plan notes that get added, or the special provisions that are getting put together at that point. So it's the PD&E, yes, gets done by the PD&E team. For us, generally, we don't take them over, but for the design and construction, it goes through the car contractor.
Good morning. I work in Hillsborough County, and we have contaminated sites that have groundwater plumes that'll go into municipal roads. And what we typically do is, with DEP, we give them a closure order with a non-recorded institutional control with the Southwest Florida Water Management District that restricts all well permitting for the groundwater. And then the closure order in that restricted area will also restrict stormwater changes and dewatering. Is that a mechanism that can be used on FDOT roads for closure?
I know the answer is no, but Kathleen can tell you why.
Yeah, it's not that the answer is no so much as that it's not our preference. What we see with that alternative institutional control is, unfortunately, a passing of responsibility and kind of dealing with that existing contamination as a burden on the innocent property owner, if you will. So if you're in Hillsborough, your roadway is suffering contamination from an off-site source that's migrated onto the roadway. Yeah, it's a good notification to use the Water Management District institutional control, but it's not really doing anything to address the situation. So now if your Public Works Department wants to go ahead and do an expansion of the roadway there, you're going to have to get a special dewatering permit from DEP and then properly dispose of that water. And so that's a lot of cost that's now being passed on to the county instead of to the responsible party. So DOT does not really support that alternative institutional control. We understand it's there and available, but we want to address it where we're helping DEP at least get some closures, conditional closures, but have a way to protect the citizens and their tax dollars from having to deal with that, where that we can go back to the responsible party for whatever that difference in dewatering of the contaminated water would be, and the proper disposal, and not have the state or, a local government have to bear that burden when we were not the cause. So I've sometimes used it as an extra one, but we still use the map note process because that's going to be more protective of the public roadway and public
Okay, yeah,
dollars.
and it's also helpful for construction because you've got it in your notes. That's what we try and do, is get the DOT, the local roads to show on their maps and stuff that they have this area so that when they come in for construction, that everything's handled properly.
Absolutely.
But that's what your map note is.
Right,
And then you also ask for the
notification
indemnity so that you can follow up for payment from a responsible party if they exist.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Are sites that you're exempt from doing cleanup on because you've acquired a contaminated site, are they marked on the map, or are they just hanging out there until something's finally cleaned up on them?
Most often, we know they're contaminated because we've discovered them in a DEP cleanup program. I guess you're right, they would be in department files. I don't know how often we share. I think there's a threshold for what we.
So I had one that was, there was a lot of remediation done, and then I don't know why, but after lots of remediation, then all of a sudden they said we're not liable to clean it up anymore. So I know it's just hanging out there under I-4.
You're talking about DOT said we're not liable for cleaning
Yes.
it up anymore?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what we've done, and I started with talking about our statutory exemptions.
Mm-hmm.
So no, we are not liable for cleaning up pre-existing contamination. We do it all the time. We do it for the safety of the, folks out there working in the roadway. So we've spent millions of dollars cleaning up other people's contamination. That's why we're talking about, hey, we want to really find some more opportunities to get DEP cleanup dollars in that situation. But when we don't have a responsibility and we weren't the responsible party and we're not going to get the closure order, we have to use our transportation dollars and focus them to delivering transportation, but we still want it to be safe for the workers.
But do you mark it on your map so that you know it's contaminated there and just no work is being done? I have one that, DOT did spend millions of dollars cleaning it up, and then one day I just got the letter saying we're not going to do it anymore. So it's just out there. It's just a dry
When you
cleaner.
mean map, you mean that,
The map note, do you put it on your map, like contaminated sites that you know about? Like,
yeah, if we've done something on them, if we've done
Then
certain,
they're marked on your map?
right, we
So if
mark
you
them
guys
in
go
the
back out there,
as-builds, and we let them know, even in our files, see, as a project comes through, the roads get done all the time, we're going through them often. So if we left something behind, if we didn't, because our job is to get the contractor through the areas.
This is I-4, so it was acquired by DOT in the 70s, and the work was done like in the 2000s when.
So I can speak to
was
our
expanded.
big transportation cleanup project that we did. So it's where I-10 and I-95 cross, and during that construction, we uncovered a lot of abandoned underground tanks that were discovered and then remediated, and we follow the same rules. Discharges were reported, they were given a site name. We either were able to complete a closure or not, depending on when we found it in construction. Those sites are also documented on and tracked by DEP. And then I know recently, so that was in the 90s, and just recently we have started working with the city, the local programs group, to close those sites out, either because we've come back and tested and we're able to determine that it's clean, or it's closed with a conditional closure.
So if a lot of remediation was done on this, and probably not much more can be done with, based on its location. So should that, it's just been hanging out there for like 10 years now. Should I contact our local DOT, District 5, and see if they want to I mean, it's chlorinated solvents. It's a, dry cleaner from a long time ago. I mean, it's your site, it's your contamination.
Is it our contamination?
It's a dry cleaner like in the 30s or something.
Yeah.
So you've had it since the 60s.
We've worked with DEP.
You're not going to find that person.
So there are orphan sites. And
it'd be an orphan
as the
site.
state, as state agencies, we work together to work through what's needed to close those sites. So the work we did, it kind of went back and forth that, and don't tell Kathleen this, but we forked over some of the money to do the assessment, site assessment and confirmation sampling, and then other times DEP use their funding. So we're trying to get the cleanup funding for the cleanup actions, but
Right. I just don't know. I mean, we can't close it in our files
Right.
until DOT finds a way. I mean,
And what we do is we put it on the DEP. At that point, they know all these sites that we acquire, they were noted previously. They were already on their radar. And when we acquire them, then they come back, hey, DOT, so how do you want to do this? And generally, we tell them, so what number am I ranking? I mean, do I rank, whatever? They're like, oh, you're a 5. So we have, at that point, we're going to be like the last. Lucky for us right now, we're at, all sites are game. So this is when we start the negotiations. Hey, that site that was a 5, are we going for it, or how are we going to deal with this? So at this point is where we're negotiating with them to start putting them back into a program. And we put them back into the program with them and request to see what's the proper way. And they ask us about the idea of the project corridor at that point, like what phase is it on in our area.
Should I just leave it as an orphan site out there, or does DOT want to know about it and try and close it on their end? I mean, I would like to close it on our end, but I don't know if,
No,
we just keep
we'd like to
ignoring
close
it as
them.
inactive.
The goal is, in reality,
I mean,
the site.
this site it's not a newly acquired DOT site.
Right. We have sites that are, like she calls them orphan shells, because if we don't have a project going through them, we don't work on them.
Right.
But right now that the rankings are where DEP may have some funds to start doing the assessments and start working with us on figuring out what's the process to go, we'll work with them back to opening those sites that have been left behind. Because in reality, we don't want to use public money until the project has a reason to go back in that area. But if DEP says that they have some funding available, we'll start ranking the sites that have the most concerns and say, hey, out of the 10, 20 sites that we have that have been left behind because they've ranked very low, can we start working in this, in this number of ways so that we can get those sites starting back up. And so we'll throw them back into the program, and DEP will start hiring the car contractors outside to start doing the cleanup. And there's ways that they can either decide to work with our car contractor to clean those sites up under their programs, or we can negotiate with them where DOT will do the cleanup and we will be reimbursed. So it depends on what's available and how much money DEP has. As you know, right now there's very little money.
So if it's under, 50 feet of soil on a ramp, or, where they're not going to do any remediation or anything further, where it seems like it would just be ready for the map note process, would that just be through, I guess, like our OGCs working together to do that? Because DOT is the responsible party and the map note.
yeah, I think that's a conversation between the DOT and DEP. What does DEP need to close that site? We can assist with access and stuff, but really, what's the plan to close it? And
It would be up to, I think, DOT to decide, since.
but we're closing it through DEP, so
Right.
it has to be an approved plan and method. Yeah.
Okay. So reach out to the local coordinator and see if they're ready to get back.
If you want, why don't you take a minute when we conclude, and we'll get
Okay.
some information and share it.
Okay.
Anybody else?
So,
There's a dog in the house.
well, one of the slides showed before we use the MOU to close out the DEP contamination, it says you have to show what kind of active remediation or remediation was done, possible, feasible. Is that talking about the on-site, the responsible party site, or is it on the DOT right away?
I mean, that's really dealing with the source property and what's been done to remediate, and then in order to support a closure of that source property, is it feasible to get into the DOT right away if contamination has migrated there? Usually not. Occasionally there are opportunities, but usually not, and then that's when it would be appropriate for the map note process. But in order to come forward and use the map note, the plume needs to be delineated, and then the idea even to support the closure is that it's stable and shrinking.
Yep.
So, those are just sort of prereqs, if you will.
Okay, thank you.
All right, unless there are any more questions, we're going to wrap this up. I want to thank the panel and everybody. Help me give them a round of applause. There we go. Just once again, I'll have the proceedings out to everybody, hopefully by this weekend. If you need continuing education credits, make sure you fill out the affidavit of attendance. If you don't have one now, I think we ran out and I've already shut the printer down. You can download it off of the website and just scan it, fill it out, scan it, and email it to me. And then I'll let you know whether you've paid the $25 or not. All right? Everybody Miko says, have a safe trip home. So we'll see you all, hopefully, if you're coming for the PFAS forum in May. We'll be back here.